When you're thinking about whale moves, you have to consider what the current conditions of the market are. Many times, what we deal with in these down markets is an opportunity for wealth building. So you always want to follow those people who are buying when everybody else is running out of the building. Today, we're going to talk about that. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back into Tech Path. We'll talk about whale moves today and get into a slew of people that I think one, will probably trust, you also maybe admire, but also if you just look at the history of what they've done in business, that should be enough for you guys to kind of follow suit with what they're going into. So we'll dive into all that good stuff. I want to thank our sponsor today. That is iTrust Capital. Get into a crypto IRA very simply by just joining on iTrust Capital. You can do a ton of things over there, both with crypto, gold, silver, as well as porting in your own IRAs. Maybe you have an existing 401k or a TSP. Any of those can, of course, roll over into iTrust. Other advantages, they've got some great examples of how this works. They do a tremendous job on protecting your assets in terms of secure storage, regulated custodian, and then, of course, 6.5 billion in transactions and 190,000 accounts created. So definitely one of the top players out there when it comes to crypto IRAs. Check them out. You can get a $100 funding reward very simply by using the link down below. All right, so I want to get into this first whale, and that, of course, is Vitalik Buterin. He rakes in nearly 700K on ETH after selling a stash of all of his crap coins. The cool thing here is a lot of times people will airdrop Vitalik all these coins, and he doesn't do anything with them. In some cases, I think at one time he was selling them and giving money to charity. But basically what he did here was he just converted it into ETH. That, of course, tells me that we are going to continue to see more and more movement on adoption when it comes to Ethereum. And I think that's going to be a factor that really plays in. If you look at some of the investments, this is his wallet, just so you guys kind of get a quick look at it. Obviously, Ethereum leading the way, and then you've got Y-Farm Finance in there, Jetcoin, Pomicoin, Safe Blast, a couple others, Eon. Not the traditional, so definitely the degen model of where he's going, but again, all ETH-based. Whole goal behind this, of course, is where Vitalik is building from an aspect of what the ecosystem looks like. He's basically supporting it with some of his investments, so good for him. And again, that's another thing. If you're looking at ETH long-term, and you want to try to consider whether you go the degen route or you go with the traditional, Rockstar ETH tokens, some of those that you can really, or maybe you're just riding on ETH, the protocol, either of which we do a really good job, I think, on ETH as part of our portfolio. It's number 2 right now. It actually surpasses Polygon over its recent sale that we just did not too long ago. So ETH number 2 may take the number 1 spot this year at some point for us. We'll talk more about that on our portfolio trades. Speaking of portfolios, here is ARK's ETF trades. And I want you to take a look at what Cathie Wood is doing. And I'm just going to go down through a few of these. Coinbase, Unity there, Coin, Shopify. Further in, you got Roblox coming in. So essentially, all of this is supporting Metaverse, Web3, and the evolution of where crypto is going. This, of course, Cathie Wood's. When you look outside of the crash period that we had with tech stocks, which was an adjustment, if you look at her portfolio prior to that, she was very early in where innovative companies were being identified. And of course, ARK was one of the key companies that were able to do that. And they did a great job. Obviously, the tech crash hurt them. But overall, I still think she is and her team are one of the best teams out there on Wall Street in terms of identifying future moves. And the key here, as you'll notice, the theme of today's show is when the markets are down, when wealth is really built, it usually is built in these markets when everything else is declining, or we're starting to see these crash scenarios that play out all the way from liquidity events, things like Silvergate, etc., all playing into it, and also goes into the narrative of what are the whales doing. This is where I think this makes a huge difference in your investing strategy going forward. If you listen to what she says, and I want you to listen to a couple of clips here, we'll have a few here today. This is a good example of how bullish she is on ETH. Listen up to what she has to say.
They're on the right track. We think there are three revolutions taking place simultaneously. There's the money revolution, which is mostly Bitcoin, a bit Ether. There is the financial services revolution, which is Ethereum, as is this notion of digital property rights. First time. That's Web3. Digital property rights. With an economics background, I know that.
All right, so she really kind of hit on a few things there. One thing is her first statement in terms of revolutions that are occurring. Bitcoin is cash, also ETH, she mentioned in that. I'd love to get your feedback. Do you think Bitcoin or Ethereum serves better as a use case for money? And I understand, sure, it's an investment right now. Some people would look at that as a long-term store of value if you look at and compare to what fiat has done over the years. If you look back 20 years on fiat, the value of what fiat is today, about 60 to 70% below what its value was 20 years ago. So in essence of what your buying power is. Is that the case for Bitcoin and Ethereum if you think about that 20 years from today? What is the value? And really, at that point, that's where you could evaluate Bitcoin or Ethereum maybe as a monetary aspect of money. This, I think, is going to be a question mark that a lot of people will try to figure out, especially investors, because investors are already starting to move in this direction. One of the, I would say the OGs, but also one of the most famous investors out of Silicon Valley is a guy by the name of Tim Draper. You've probably heard of him. We've talked about him here on the show before. Here's a clip from Tim Draper to talk, and he's talking about Web3. So I want you to listen to this. This is a Silicon Valley guy who's been investing in startups all of his life, and he's taking a look at the next innovation layer. Listen to what he had to say.
The media is capturing people's imagination, and they're kind of going, Web3, like we got a new thing coming. And what it does is it forced me, and I'm sure it's forcing entrepreneurs everywhere, to think, okay, with Web3, what can I do? And so all of a sudden they're getting more creative. They're coming up with really interesting new projects that nobody ever imagined. And they're saying, we're going to make it simpler for you, the user. In some ways, I think, oh, it's a hype monster.
All right, so simple for the user, a lot of utility use case that we talk about here on the show around Web3, and the business case for Web3 is already starting to find its way out there. There's a lot that I need to talk about on this. We got a lot to cover in today's show. There is something that is happening in Silicon Valley, I'll just mention, is there are a lot of investors that have basically taken black eyes on Web3. You have to kind of understand that. There are also a lot of investors that are starting to innovate and move into AI. I think that Web3 and AI are actually going to coexist, and that's something that a lot of people haven't talked about, but we'll probably do a show just on that for you guys to kind of explain my thoughts on that, because there's a lot of strategies I think are being played out in Silicon Valley right now from guys like Draper to be aware of it. This is Tim's example of what he says that I thought was very interesting. This was a quote from him. He hints that benefits to retailers is obvious. This is talking about Web3. Women control about 80% of retail spending, and the retailers that save a lot of fees paid to credit card companies, et cetera, by choosing Bitcoin. Women constitute 30% of all crypto owners in the US. So he thinks the next bull market is going to potentially be women. And if you think about Web3, you look at women head of household that are going to start to discover NFTs, the gaming integration because of their both family and kids. Also the tie-in to just how women are looking at new investment strategies, which I find more and more in this market, in millennials and Zoomers, definitely more in crypto than what we see in traditional finance. So just very intriguing to me. A lot of Web3 ladies out there. We just had Sandy on from Unstoppable the other day talking about their Web3 Women initiative. And I think this is one that is really starting to make some waves. And I think retail will be a big one going forward. Here's Tim Draper talking about the first public Cryptoids drop is officially live. Here's what I'm so excited about in this project. Again, he goes back into the connection of why women could potentially lead out what's going to happen within Web3, especially in terms of adoption. And we'll talk about that at the end of the show with Paris Hilton to kind of explain that. Because I think there's a lot of connections here from a culture aspect. Speaking of culture, the guy who's talking about culture changing in Web3 is Yat Siu, Animoca Brand CEO. Listen to what he had to say here on this clip.
FOMO has typically been known for fear of missing out. But one of the new monikers I've learned is that it's force of moving on. And that's actually what I'm really excited about for Web3. Because right now...
So what he gets at is the FOMO, but the real scenario that they've taken is this force on moving on. And I think that is a good thing, because what you've seen is a lot of people harking on the failures of where crypto is so far. Let's not forget the failures of .bomb. Let's not forget the failures of the stock market prior to COVID. Let's not forget the failures of so many financial institutions that essentially started the last recession and implosion, economic implosion that we've had. So this is just another business cycle like any other. I agree with him. I think the next move is to move into the next layer of where innovation is going to start, knowing that there are going to be companies like a Facebook, like an Amazon, like a Google, all of those, Oracle. You can just run down the list of all those that came out of the .bomb are going to come out of this period in crypto. And I think that is something to be aware of. This is a further clip from him to talk about, where he's investing. Listen to what he has to say.
Have any favorite NFTs?
Well, I mean, I don't have, and I have many NFTs in my collection, so it's hard to say, asking your favorite NFT is a little bit like asking what's your favorite child, right? But of course, I'm very fond of my Bored Apes. I'm very fond of the Land and Sandbox. Most recently also the...
And do you have any favorite NFTs?
Well, I mean, I don't have, and I have many NFTs in my collection, so it's hard to say, asking your favorite NFT is a little bit like asking what's your favorite child, right? But of course, I'm very fond of my Bored Apes. I'm very fond of the Land and Sandbox. Most recently also the Cool Cats, right? And of course, every game, I do try to play every one of our games. So I do have a very big collection of NFTs.
Do you invest as well on secondary markets? Buying
Yes.
any altcoins on exchanges?
So personally, I sometimes do that, but I don't have that much time, right? Most of the time I do it because, my son is, who's very much a degen trader and sort of active, and he's like, oh, you should look at this. Okay, it's not a lot. It's mostly for fun, right? I don't.
So not a lot, mostly for fun. What I'm getting at here with Yat Siu is he's clearly in on where NFTs are going for the future. So if you think about whale moves, think about whale moves in the NFT markets as well. You can gauge a lot in what's happening with Web3, the game companies that of course are developing under Animoca, along with where NFTs are also structured and growing, because there's so much there in terms of digital collectibles that I think we have to put it in our whale move series that we do on these videos like this. It's part of the overall ecosystem now in terms of how we see not only mass adoption, but also how you guys can catch on to these front-run opportunities here. A couple of things he said here was in a tweet in celebration of the Mochaverse, mint happening in less than 8 hours. This didn't go perfect, but the point is that there's a lot of interest here in what Animoca is doing, what their initiatives are around NFTs. I think the future of where we see Web3, and I fear to say this, is that unless we see some release of pressure from the US in terms of regulatory environment, I fear that the Pacific Rim is going to be the new hot zone for where Web3 will really develop. We already see this in terms of the founders that we bring on the shows here. Almost all of the developers are outside the United States. This is a problem, but it is also an opportunity. And I think it's an opportunity that, one, Silicon Valley will continue to push on. But more importantly, I think it's an opportunity for regulators to start to understand just how far behind we might be. So it's a big one to kind of track. Further into it, I want to talk about Michael Saylor. Here's another whale, of course, that is on the move. And if you look at his holdings, this is MicroStrategy's holdings right here. Let's go to a full screen on this because you can really see the chart here. Just to kind of hover in on his average price. This is a dollar cost average. So he is slowing down his price, and he's dropping about, a little bit, about around $100 every once in a while per transaction. The point is that Bitcoin, or his current Bitcoin average right now, still holding around $30,000 on Bitcoin. So something to be thinking about. Is Saylor the one we should be watching? Maybe. I've found that I am starting to find other proponents of both Bitcoin and also where the initiative of the next evolution of finance is going. Here's a clip from Saylor that I was a little bit surprised with when I saw this the first time. But if you look at what he had to say here about Silvergate.
To buy more Bitcoin, Will you continue to do business with the bank, given the fact that, in addition to the headlines today, that it is in the midst of a U.S. fraud probe over the FTX Alameda dealings? We have seen what was essentially, based on filings, a run on that bank.
I think they've handled themselves admirably, given the stress of the situation. And yes, we will continue to do business with Silvergate.
So I just don't understand that statement. I mean, it could have been a general statement, but I'm sure that their strategist within MicroStrategy and his team of investors already kind of knew, because this was just a few weeks ago. So he already it was 2 weeks ago. This video was dropped 2 weeks ago on Online Hustles. And I would think that you would have enough understanding of where this is going. Silvergate's been on our radar for quite some time, obviously because of the FTX fallout. This concerns me a little bit, but at the same time, when you look at the encompassing factor of all whales out there, there's going to be winners and losers. And I don't know if Michael Saylor ends up on the win side or the losing side. We'll see as we continue to see things out. Overall, he's a long-term holder, so he's going to end up on the win side. He'll 3x his money or more in the next 10 years. So I don't necessarily think that it's going to be a bad deal. This was also, remember, Saylor's huge proponent on Lightning. That I do agree with. I do think his shift to this of course, was just a quick video on Lightning. Even though I want to play this for you guys, because there's something.
What are we doing here?
You should watch here in terms of the speed.
Bitcoin Lightning. How does it work?
I will show you.
Or lack thereof. We're going in.
She's going to issue.
There's the check.
Okay.
Boom. There's the QR.
Okay.
Transition 1, 2, 3. And you can kind of see this is a little bit slower than traditional merchant services. So this concerns me because there's not scale on Lightning just yet. Now, granted, you can still continue to scale Lightning also from a developmental standpoint, but it is one that I think is very early. We're very early use case, also very early in terms of where it's going to be. So the likelihood of Saylor being on the right side of the fence right now on Lightning, I still think that's a good play for him and also a good play for the industry as a whole. All right, so also here's a little bit in the way of Mark Cuban, what he told the Forbes reporter on this. I think the next possible implosion is the discovery and removal of wash trades on central exchanges. Cuban told The Street, there are supposed $10 million in trades and liquidity for tokens that have very little utilization. I don't see how they can be that liquid. So this, of course, is getting into the point of those tokens that don't have utility. Are we going to see a pressure? If wash trading does get controlled, the likelihood is we could see a breakdown in a lot of these emerging tokens, which would essentially push a lot of that wash off the table. In the way of wash trades being eliminated. So this will be interesting because whether or not this becomes a scenario from a regulatory standpoint, or more so from an alignment with exchanges that maybe go in that direction. Here's Mark Cuban talking about a lot of ETH low cap cryptos, even though he's talking about that right there in the quote. But I want you to look at some of the ones that he's invested in. So he Klima DAO, you've got base carbon tones in there. Let's go further into this. Of course, ApeCoin, Blockto token, Lithosphere injective protocol, which we've talked about before on the show. And then further up here is BLT because it provides flow wallets for flow. And then, of course, Bitcoin and ETH. More of an Ethereum maxi for sure. So again, if you look at Cuban pushing more on the ETH strategy here, looking at opportunities here in a lot of these emerging. Now, you have to remember, when you follow these whales, they invest like whales, meaning that they invest in 10 projects that they're expecting one winner, maybe two, maybe 20 projects and they're expecting one or maybe two winners. So their expectations are quite different, much like an early investor in Silicon Valley or in any sort of startup. Same kind of scenario that plays into that. Here's Cuban on Decrypt. This I thought was an interesting statement that he had right here in terms of the future of Web3. Listen to what he had to say about this.
People started making readily available the tokenization via the smart contracts, and that all of a sudden is what really enabled almost all of this, right? The simplification of smart contracts and the almost ubiquity within the industry of smart contracts. That was the change. That's what gets me excited, because now all these companies, all these SaaS companies, all these different companies, I can see just disrupting the fuck out of them, right? I mean, it's just.
All right, so I mean, that's the point right there, is the disruption is real within the smart contract concept, and what we'll see with even things like 4337 and the future of that, from subscription payments, scenarios like that really kind of hold back a lot of SaaS services. This could change the dynamic around where Ethereum really goes in terms of the future. A lot playing on the future of where Ethereum is heading, and of course, Cuban, I would say, yeah, one of the ETH maxis out there for sure. Another previous maxi is, of course, Mr. Kevin O'Leary, and this was a clip coming in from himself, his own show, where he went on to a Fox Morning show. But listen to what they asked him about on this.
And I showed it to Linda, and she said, "That's ingenious. Why didn't you think of that?"
I know. I don't know why I didn't think about it either. But you know, listen, you can't always be right, Kevin.
No, I know that.
You can't always be right. And perhaps you were a little wrong with saying that you were a spokesperson for FTX. Sam Bankman-Fried.
That was horrible. But I want to tell you something about venture investing.
Okay.
Since the beginning of time, since 1954, when they started tracking venture investing in the United States out of Boston, 8 out of 10 deals fail within 3 years, and 2 make you 1,000 times on your money. All
right, so what O'Leary's talking about here is the cycle of venture investing. It's one that I've been involved in. I know a ton of companies and people that go this route in terms of really trying to build capital and wealth. And he is right that venture investing, most of your money is going to go to zero, but it's that one that goes 1000x that completely makes up for all the mistakes. I agree with Kevin on that. That is something that is an agreement. I want to cut back to this video for a second. I have it on Freeze Fame right here. Now, this is on his own channel, but you'll notice here that it says he wants to find out if your business qualifies for ERC. So this is, of course, Wonder Trust, where you scan the code. And of course, if you understand O'Leary, and I listened to him on the Daily Show the other day, go into a debate, he is a promoter, really, more so than an investor. I don't necessarily think that his investment plans, but his promotions are real. Now, I would agree with him is that FTX was a startup. He had a bad actor. There are bad actors in other startups out there. This one just happened to be on the front page of every newspaper in the world because of the exposure, and also for the need for mainstream media to be able to put a crypto company right there on the bullseye so they can throw darts at it. That's a typical strategy that most of mainstream media will go about when moving in this direction. And the bad thing is they've got, a carnival actor in the way of O'Leary to kind of push into this narrative. The only thing is he is kind of a secondary investor. I think he's more of a character and a cosplay character playing on Shark Tank, being the bad guy. But he does have some good variances, I think, in terms of his investment strategies. It's just not one that I follow really that much anymore. Now, let's remember that O'Leary was the guy that said Meta was trash. And that's where he sold at $90 when it was all the way flying down the charts. And of course, Meta right now in a bear market after a new strategy of what Zuckerberg has done, which is basically cleanse the company, getting back to understanding of how to build a workforce, maybe utilization of AI, the development of where VR, AR will go. I think Meta is now on a big track going forward, and I think Zuckerberg has maybe won up the market right now. And of course, Meta trading at $185, so about double there had O'Leary been able to hold on right there at Meta. Which, by the way, I mean, we've invested in Meta. It's one of the stocks I hold, and the reason is because they have such a strong metaverse play, and I think their AR play is one that is going to make a difference in the future. So Zuck should probably be another whale that we watch for our whale moves videos. Another whale that we added to our list this time is none other than Paris Hilton. Now, Paris Hilton, whether you like her, you hate her, this is a smart lady. And her ability to identify early trends, to me, are the best investors out there, because there's always an investor in the room that maybe isn't the smartest one, but they know when something is a trend and not a fad. That right there is a very, very important thing. Let me play this clip. This was a Fallon clip.
Last time you were on the show, I asked you to explain NFTs, and you did so in a great way, which is a very hard thing to really explain to a lot of people. But since then, Forbes has named you one of the top 50 most influential people in the NFT space. So congrats on that. You know what you're doing.
Thank you. I'm so proud. I love being a part of this community and being a voice and sharing my platform and just getting the word out there, because I think it's just such an incredible thing to be a part of.
Yeah, I jumped in.
I know, I heard. I'm so happy I taught you what they were.
You did. You taught me what's up, and then I bought an ape.
I got an ape too, because I saw you on.
All right, so she taught Fallon what an NFT is. He went in and FOMO'd in. Probably made some money because he probably bought this. This was a year ago, I think. Let me look at the video. Yeah, over a year ago when this was done. So obviously Fallon was able to probably do pretty well. The point is that she's very early and she understands these early trends. You look and follow what she's doing. This, of course, right here, Paris Hilton, get ready to party on the beach, pick up cute collectibles. This, of course, is Sandbox Game launching the new experience in there, February 13th. This happened. Here's Sandbox, of course, right here. Here's Paris Land. Again, early identifier, already a culture icon. And when you look at most influential, I would say top 50, I would probably put Paris Hilton in the top 10 in terms of most influential when it comes to NFTs. So again, another whale that I think is one worthy of watching. If you just look at just some of the things that she is doing. Right here's Paris Hilton introduced the IME app, which with you can customize and animate your NFT. Another opportunity, building and developing, and she's been doing that for quite some time. I'm surprised that we haven't seen Kardashian. She got burned early on just tokenization. Maybe doesn't completely understand the connectivity of culture that I think Hilton does. That's the difference between Hilton and, say, the Kardashians, is she's been able to connect to where culture is moving, whether it's in fashion and or style. And I think that's why NFTs mesh so well with her, not only her platform, but her audience, but also with the business communities out there that understand what she represents. So there's a lot to it for where Hilton is going. Here she is showing off her augmented reality NFT. So again, this is something that for someone to understand, be able to bring in mainstream Hollywood, Jimmy Fallon, and then also be able to bring mainstream female investors, because this to me is one of the things I think that will be key in the next layer. We talked about it earlier, and that's a good example of it. All right, so last clip here is this one right here. Let me play this one. Listen to what she has to say about AR.
You talk to like a 13, 14-year-old, they're in there all day. That's where they're hanging out with their friends, they're going shopping, they're hanging out. So this new generation is in the metaverse, and that has nothing to do with crypto or any of that. It's just a place where people can go and be their digital identity and be an avatar and be able to be whoever they want to be. And it's been exciting because I've been excited about the metaverse before there was even a name for it. Like back in 2017, I was already mapping myself out, and I created this place called Paris World, and you could come and be an avatar and hang out with people and be able to purchase items. And now I've launched 3 different metaverses, and I'm just glad that the technology has finally caught up to me.
Technology has finally caught up to me. We'll end on that. The point being is, as these whales start to identify these early adoption trends, these market moves that happen, I always follow those early identifiers, in the sense that most of the time of my investment career and my business career is those that have been able to ID these early starts are the ones that end up being the leaders in the space, and typically will take you down the right direction and be part of your own research. So just kind of run these whales into your plan. Make sure you're tracking those. Hopefully you can watch this. We do this series often. So love to get your feedback. Drop some comments down below. Who do you think would be a whale that we should add to our shows? These are a little bit long now because we need to shrink these up. I think there's too many whales out there to follow. But anyway, if you're not in the Diamond Circle, get in. It's a really easy tool over on Substack. You'll be able to find it over there. And of course, you can click the link down below. If you guys want to find me, it's out there on Twitter @Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.